Welcome to this explainer. Think back to the very early days of the internet. It was a wild, completely borderless frontier. It was this place of just endless possibility. But like any wild frontier, it eventually needed a sheriff, or well, at least a really thick rule book. So today, we're exploring the fascinating world of cyber law. This is the absolutely crucial framework that keeps our digital lives functioning, secure, and fair. I'm so thrilled you're here because understanding this stuff, it isn't just for lawyers anymore. It's essential for literally anyone who clicks, swipes, or buys anything online. Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for the day. We'll be looking at Welcome to Cyberspace, the IT Act of 2000, protecting your digital assets, the rules of e-commerce, and finally, cybercrimes and digital justice. All right, Section 1. Welcome to cyberspace. So before we can even talk about the laws governing cyberspace, we really have to understand what it is. It's this virtual, totally borderless environment where our digital lives happen. And to appreciate how incredibly fast the laws had to adapt, just look at this evolution. I mean, we went from Babbage's mechanical engine way back in 1822, moved to those massive room-sized computers like ENIAC in 1945, and then networked them all together with ARPANET in 1969. The microprocessor boom of the 70s, that accelerated everything. But the real game changer? For sure, it was 1989 when Tim Berners-Lee invented the World Wide Web. Almost overnight, the internet transformed from this obscure research network into the massive global information medium we all rely on today. Now, this total explosion of technology left lawmakers completely scratching their heads. I mean, how do you govern a place you can't even point to on a map? They basically split into two philosophies. First, you have the doctrinal approach. This tries to stretch existing offline legal doctrines to fit online conduct. It's kind of like taking an old defamation law and just applying it to a modern social media post. But as you can guess, that often falls short. Then there's the real approach. This one argues that we need to invent entirely new, cyber-specific legal frameworks tailored directly to this borderless, decentralized digital space. So when disputes inevitably pop up in this new frontier, and they always do, someone has to have the actual authority to decide who's right. There's a very clear hierarchy of authority here. At the foundational level, you have adjudicating officers handling cyber offenses with penalties up to 5 crore rupees. To put that into perspective, that's a massive amount of money for a localized dispute. Then you step up to the Cyber Appellate Tribunal, or CART, which is a specialized quasi-judicial body just for IT Act appeals. From there, it escalates to the district and sessions courts, up to the high courts, and finally, the Supreme Court of India, which is the ultimate final authority. Moving right along to Section 2, the IT Act of 2000. This brings us to the actual rulebook. The primary legislation governing electronic transactions in India is the Information Technology Act of 2000. It's actually based on a United Nations model law, and its core mission is pretty straightforward. Legal recognition of electronic records and signatures, facilitate e-commerce, prevent cybercrimes, establish regulatory authority. Simply put, this is the whole shebang that makes an email just as legally binding as a stamped letter and makes hacking a punishable offense. Now, a huge part of the IT Act is giving real legal weight to digital signatures. But you might be wondering, how do we actually prove you are who you say you are online? Well, it's done through something called public key cryptography. Think of this like a secure padlock and a key. You hand out open padlocks, that's your public key to everyone. Anyone can put a message in a box and snap your padlock shut. But here is the genius part. Only you hold the private key to unlock it. It's asymmetric. The key used to lock the data is completely different from the key used to unlock it. Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? It builds into a really seamless 4-step verification process to create an actual digital signature. First, the document is hashed, which basically means it's turned into a unique fixed-length digest. Second, the sender encrypts that hash using their private key. Third, the receiver decrypts it using the sender's public key. And finally, they compare the hash values. If they match perfectly, it guarantees the document hasn't been altered at all. It acts as the absolute digital equivalent of a secure, tamper-proof wax seal. Next up, Section 3, protecting your digital assets. We all know how to protect our physical stuff, right? But how does the law guard your intellectual property when it's literally just ones and zeros? Say you write a brilliant piece of software. How do you stop someone from just copying it? Well, it's through copyrights and patents, but they function a bit differently here. A software copyright automatically protects your actual code, the expression of your idea, the exact moment you create it. Now, in India, code alone generally isn't patentable. Actually, scratch that, it can be, but only if it solves a specific technical problem or has a concrete technical effect. If it does that, a patent protects the underlying inventive concept itself. And hey, even your electronic databases can be legally protected, provided you've shown sufficient originality in how you compiled and arranged all that data. Now, what's really fascinating about this is the legal status of domain names. We usually just think of them as web addresses, what you type into your browser. But legally, they are so much more. In a massive landmark case back in 2004 involving Satyam Infoway, the Supreme Court of India officially recognized that domain names are highly valuable, legally protectable business identifiers. They're treated just like trademarks. You can't just buy a famous company's name and hold it hostage. No way. That's called cyber squatting, and the law will absolutely take it away from you. All right, Section 4, the rules of e-commerce. Think about how many times you've bought something online this week or agreed to some new app's terms of service. Cyberspace isn't just a place for sharing information anymore. It's a massive, buzzing global marketplace. And you probably didn't sign anything with a pen, right? Yet, under Section 10A of the IT Act, these paperless e-contracts, whether they're formed via email or literally just by clicking a button, hold the exact same legal weight as a physical paper document governed by the old Indian Contract Act of 1872. The digital agreements you and I make every single day are incredibly real in the eyes of the law. So, what does this all mean for you? It means you need to know the types of digital agreements you're entering into. We've got shrink wrap agreements, which are terms kind of hidden inside physical software packaging. Then there's the click wrap, that ubiquitous I agree button that, let's be honest, absolutely none of us ever read before clicking. Well, courts actually enforce those. And finally, there's browse wrap, where terms are just casually posted somewhere at the bottom of a website. These are a lot harder to enforce in court unless the site can prove they gave you adequate notice. Here's a really crucial detail to remember. Cyber law doesn't exist in a vacuum. Under the Indian Evidence Act, specifically Section 65B, if you want to use a WhatsApp message, an email, or frankly any electronic record as evidence in a court case, it absolutely requires a signed certificate by a responsible official guaranteeing its genuineness. Without that Section 65B certificate, your digital evidence might just be completely thrown out of court. And finally, Section 5, Cybercrimes and Digital Justice. Well, we've talked a lot about the rules of business, but what about the outlaws out there on the digital frontier? The internet can provide this illusion of anonymity, making some people feel completely invincible. But this leads us to a critical question. What exactly happens when the rules of cyberspace are broken? The theoretical laws of e-commerce suddenly give way to the very hard-hitting reality of criminal justice. The consequences are severe, folks. The stakes are incredibly high. Cheating by impersonation or identity theft can land you 3 years in prison and a really hefty fine. Publishing private images without consent, that's a massive privacy violation, also carrying 3 years. The law also takes a definitive zero-tolerance stance against heinous acts like distributing child sexual abuse material. That carries strict prison terms and massive fines. And the most extreme, cyberterrorism, which threatens the unity, integrity, or security of the nation, can result in imprisonment up to life. Cyberspace might be virtual, but let me tell you, the prison time is very, very physical. To put this heavy legalese into perspective, let's look at a real-world example. One of India's first landmark cyber harassment cases was the Ritu Kohli case back in 2001. An offender maliciously shared the victim's personal phone number and home address in obscene online chat rooms. This led to terrifying, non-stop midnight phone calls. The physical consequences of this online stalking forced authorities into action. And guess what? They successfully tracked the perpetrator down using their IP address and charged them. It was a massive wake-up call that digital actions have devastating real-world impacts, and that law enforcement absolutely could and would hunt digital criminals down. But as we wrap up this explainer, we really have to look to the future. Our technology is evolving at breakneck speed. The idea of regulating the internet is kind of like trying to catch the wind. The limitations of the IT Act of 2000 are already showing when it comes to emerging tech. This leaves us with a final, pretty provocative thought. As cyberspace rapidly evolves with generative AI, blockchain, and these increasingly borderless technologies, will our current cyber laws be enough to protect you tomorrow? It's a massive question lawmakers are wrestling with right now, and it's one that will absolutely define the next era of our digital frontier. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Stay curious and definitely stay secure out there.